Gentleman from Vermont.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's nice to see you again, Mr. Greenspan.
Thank you.
Mr. Greenspan, as the nation's chief economist, I would like to tap your expertise. Over the years, I think, as you know, you and I have disagreed on some major economic issues. As I recall, the last time you were here, you informed us, to my amazement, that you actually believe in the abolition of the minimum wage at a time when many of us think we should substantially raise the minimum wage. But I also have a very difficult time in recognizing the kind of rosy economy that you are portraying. And that is not the economy that I see in Vermont, and not the economy I think that exists in many areas of this country. The reality is, as you know, that tens of millions of Americans today are working longer hours for lower wages. 25 or 30 years ago, when you and I were a little bit younger, the norm was that in the middle class, one breadwinner, one person could earn enough money to take care of the family. And today, for the middle class, that is very much the exception to the rule. The statistics are rather amazing about how many two-worker families there are because of the decline in real wages. With a $400 billion trade deficit, some folks, my colleagues, talked about steel, but it's not just steel. We have lost millions of decent-paying manufacturing jobs to China, Mexico, and elsewhere, and they're often being replaced by part-time, temporary jobs in the service economy, which have no benefits, which are low wage. We have 44 million Americans who have no health insurance. Millions of senior citizens can't afford their prescription drugs. One end of the country to another, there's a housing crisis. Middle-class families are paying 50, 60% of their incomes from housing. Families are going in debt to pay for college. The child care situation is a national disgrace. So I don't quite see the economy that you are talking about for the working families of this country. But in fact, the issue that I wanted you to comment on had to deal with a front-page story that appeared in the Wall Street Journal on Monday. And that dealt with the growth of economic oligarchies in this country and the reality that a small handful of corporate executives have enormous power today over the U.S. economy, and perhaps never before in our history have so few people had so much power over the American economy as is the case today. The Wall Street Journal gave some examples, and let me give some others. 20 years ago, there were thousands of small cable TV companies. Today, a pending deal would leave 3 companies in control of 2/3 of the market. We used to have many defense contractors selling defense products to the government. Today, there are 5. We used to have many, or at least 8 Baby Bell telephone companies. Today, there are 4. In terms of the media, fewer and fewer giant media corporations control television, radio, newspapers, and magazine. Oil. In the wake of oil company mergers, 5 companies control more than 2/5 of domestic production. Agribusiness, 5 firms now account for over 80% of the beef packing market. 6 firms account for 75% of pork packing. Airline competition is almost non-existent in many parts of this country. So my question to you is, has the government been too lax in terms of enforcing antitrust regulations? Have we allowed fewer and fewer corporate executives to have huge amounts of economic power by controlling industry after industry? Is it morally right that CEOs of large corporations now make over 500 times what their workers make and seem to make more money to the degree that they lay off American workers? Does any of this, do you have any concern about any of these issues?
Well, Congressman, let me just say there are a few qualifications I would make to the data that you cite. First, to be sure, there has been a very considerable consolidation of defense procurement activities because the defense budget as a percent of the GDP is very much smaller than it was in periods past. So when you have a declining industry, you would expect that to happen.
Several $100 billion is not insignificant anywhere.
Several $100 billion is a good deal less than remember we're talking about the relationship within the economy. So that if you go back 20, 30 years, the proportion of the economy which represented defense was much larger, and you can afford, or put it this way, that there was enough business for a much larger number of companies to function.
But it's not just defense, Mr. Greenspan.
No, I understand that. Let me go down to, to be sure, there's been a consolidation in the oil industry, but remember that a very significant change has occurred in the last generation or so, when most of the oil, a very significant part of the oil-producing properties have effectively been taken over by host countries, especially in the Middle East, so that the nature of the international oil companies have changed. Now, I'm not going to say what is in the media. The media is a very significantly controlled operation. That really gets down to what government policy should or should not be. But we have an extraordinarily competitive economy today. It's more competitive than I ever recall it, and indeed the international aspects of the competition is one of the reasons why I think, contrary to the remarks that you made, that the standard of living of this country is higher than it's ever been on average. And two,
I would respectfully disagree with you on that, and I think the facts do not speak to what you said.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Chairman, wish to continue it.
I just basically wish to stipulate that we have an extraordinary standard of living. I don't deny that there are, as there always will be, significant parts of our population which are basically in difficulty in one form or another with respect to the economy. I think that we ought to work as hard as we can to alleviate that, but I don't think it changes the fact that the economy is doing extraordinarily well in a historic context, that all of the data that most economists would adhere to believe the standard of living is higher than ever before, on average. And if you wish to dispute that, then to be sure we do have a very significant disagreement, as we always do.
Gentleman's time has expired. The pivoting from one corner of the philosophy